What if I were to tell you that your biggest financial risk isn't market volatility, it's not taxes, it's not inflation, and it's not even land prices? It's waking up one day and realizing that we traded our best years for someone else's idea of success. And you know, over the years, I've met with so many families that built incredible lives. But for some, even with the wealth, things felt unfinished. And it's not always about the money, but it's about what it's for. And that's one of the reasons why we're here today. We're going to talk about how your wealth can serve your life and not the other way around. So let me take you to a place some of you might be familiar with. This is a picture of the Riverside Golf and Country Club just outside of Saskatoon. Maybe you've played on that course. Maybe you're imagining playing on that course when you're retired. There's a gentleman, his name is Bobby Jones, and he's one of golf's all-time greats. He's also the co-founder of Augusta National, and he once said that golf is played mainly on a 5.5-inch course, the space between your ears. And you know, that really stuck with me because it's so true, right? When it comes to investing and financial planning, what happens up here matters more than almost anything else. So today we're going to take a deeper dive, and we're going to look at money through a different lens. We're going to talk about how to make some intentional choices and how to create the kind of wealth that really supports the life that we all want. Warren Buffett once said, the most important quality for an investor is temperament, and it's not intellect. So in other words, it's not what you know, it's how we react to things. And you know, investing isn't the game where someone with 160 IQ beats a person with 130 IQ, right? And behavioral finance really helps us understand why sometimes smart people make poor decisions when it comes to money, but also how we can avoid some of those traps. So these books that you see up on the screen and the ideas behind them really help me work with our clients, and we use them every day to help build better outcomes for our clients. Behavioral biases. So what we're looking at here is 5 common traps that we all fall into. And this is where the mind and how we feel really start to influence our investment choices. So the first one is familiarity. And this is choosing what's already known to us, like a particular stock over maybe another option that might be out there. So what does this do? Well, it can create less diversification in your portfolio. Less diversification, you got more risk. The next one is confirmation bias, and this is seeking out facts that confirm our beliefs. So if I like a particular stock or company and I Google it, it's usually the positive things that show up on my feed, right? Anchoring bias. So this is where we latch onto the first number that we hear, even though we know it might be irrelevant. So an example of that would be, I bought a stock for $50, even though the fundamentals changed and the company doesn't look as good as it did once. I'm going to hang on to that stock because it's got to go back to $50 again, right? So this might mean missing out on opportunities because I'm clinging to the past. Loss aversion. So this is pretty interesting. This is fearing loss more than valuing a gain. And there's a recent study, and it shows that losses are about twice as powerful as gains. So think about that for a second. In order to feel as good as making $100, you got to avoid losing $200. So an example of that might be selling too quickly if the market drops. Even though we know it's not the right thing to do, sometimes those fear-based decisions can really lock in those losses. And then the last one is recency, and this is believing what just happened is going to keep happening. So the stock market dropped last week, so it can't be a good time to invest because the market's going to keep going down. Now, these aren't just theories. These are things that I see all the time. They show up in people's portfolios. They show up in planning, but they also show up in missed opportunities. This is a great chart. It shows something pretty simple, but pretty profound. So this is a 4-year period of the S&P 500. And Charles Schwab examined how the market reacted, and then they demonstrated how some of these behavioral biases appeared to influence the stock market, especially leading up to the COVID-19 crash in 2020. So we got to remember, it's not the market that determines our success, but it's our behavior and how we react to things. Alpha. Alpha is often used in our industry to describe added value, and that's exactly what I try and deliver through the coaching and the teaching I try and apply this across our clients' financial lives, and not just in investment management, but also in the financial plans that we build for people. And Vanguard, which is a huge $10 trillion investment firm, did a study, and they found that advisors can actually add up to 3% a year in additional value for their clients. Half of that is by helping people avoid making poor decisions. And the key tool that I use to do this is a financial plan. So let's take a deeper dive into this. Now, one of the most common questions that I've got asked throughout my career is, am I going to be okay? So it might be phrased differently depending who I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to a young couple and they're starting out, they might be saying, hey, are we ever going to be able to afford a home, right? How do we save enough money for a home? Or I might be talking to another couple that maybe they're 2 or 3 years away from retirement. And they're saying, Kevin, do we have enough money to retire on? And not only to retire, but do we have enough money to retire and then live the rest of our lives in comfort? Or it could be someone that is thinking about their estate plan. So they've worked hard their entire life, they built wealth, and they're saying, how do we make sure that we don't let half of this go to the government in the form of taxes someday? So again, the question might be phrased a little bit differently, but the underlying question is always the same, right? Is, am I going to be okay? And planning really gives us a way to answer that. So I'm a certified financial planner. I've been in this industry for 34 years. I've built thousands of financial plans for people. I've helped hundreds of people retire. And I can tell you today, technology, it's a game changer. I've seen more changes in the last 24 months than I've seen in the last decade. And today we can build a financial plan for someone, but we can also push it. We can stress test it. We can see if it can withstand the marathon of our lives. And we use some pretty sophisticated software to do this. We can actually run over 1,000 what-if scenarios. So what if the market crashes right before you retire? What if you spend more than you thought? What if inflation is higher than you anticipated? The software actually stress tests those questions and then gives you a probability score, essentially anticipating whether or not your retirement and your lifestyle goals are going to stay on track. And if that score drops too much, and you can see an example of it up on the screen there, we're going to make an adjustment to the plan. And you can't wait a year or two to make that adjustment. You have to make those changes today. So this is the kind of planning that gives a lot of people confidence. So instead of second guessing every dip in the market or listening to the latest news headlines, which we've all heard a lot of in the last week or so, they've got a clear path forward. And again, remember, it's not just about rates of return, it's about having that peace of mind. So this is just one of the outputs our planning software creates. And I want you to think of those circles as your dashboard, and they represent their different financial goals. So you can see retirement right in the top middle, 150%. So these people are already retired, they had more than enough money, they were at 150% of their goal, but they had some other goals, right? They wanted some solar panels for the cabin. They wanted to go on a European trip. They needed a new vehicle, and they wanted a cash reserve. So they wanted to set aside some money for their kids someday and gift that to their kids. And they also needed $7,200 a month after tax to live off of. That was their lifestyle needs. So as you can see, they were on target to hit all their goals. They love this, it's visual, it's easy to see. But what if something changed? Let's say they got 3 girls, they want to give the girls some money. Let's say they wanted to give them each $200,000. Well, maybe that retirement number drops from 150% to something much lower, possibly even jeopardizing their own retirement. But they love the fact that they can see it, it's quick, it's visual. Now in our last meeting, we went through this, and it was pretty interesting because they said, hey, we're at 150%. What if we spend a little bit more money? What if we spend $8,500 a month instead of $7,200? Well, it was easy to make that change for them, and the needle dropped from 150% to 138%. They're still on track. We all decided to spend a little bit more money and make a few more memories. That's what it's for. So before I switch to the next slide, I want you guys to think about wealth and what wealth means to you. So wealth means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, right? Money. So money is definitely a form of wealth. Travel. So that European trip, or maybe taking our kids or our grandkids on a special vacation. Health is a big one. Both physically and mentally, no amount of money can replace that. Relationships, having a strong connection with our family and friends is so important. Time's a big one, right? We're all only given so much time, and money is something that we trade our time for. Music. I guess music could be a form of wealth, but I actually put that up there for a different reason. I put that up there to remind me of something I want to share with you. I think it's a pretty powerful thought. And there's a country music singer that I think most of us know, Garth Brooks. And Garth Brooks has a great quote that really sums up this question about what is wealth. And this is his quote. He says that you aren't wealthy until you have something that money can't buy. There's a lady, her name is Bonnie Ware, and she's a palliative care nurse, and she's worked her life with folks in their final days, and she wrote a pretty deeply emotional book called The 5 Regrets of Dying. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And I wish I let myself be happier. So I want to share just a real quick story with you guys. I had a client of mine pass away. It's going on about 4 years ago now, and I'm going to call him Glenn. And Glenn had a dream, and it was to own a retirement property on Vancouver Island. And I worked with Glenn for about 20 years. He was a great guy. I respected him immensely. He worked super hard. He built one heck of a nest egg. And in our meetings, often we would talk about, investments, of course, and rates of return and the economy and all that good stuff. But more often than not, we'd come back to that retirement dream. What kind of home he wanted to buy or build, and he wanted lots of wood, so either a log home or a timber frame home. He talked about the flights into Victoria. He talked about buying a boat. He wanted to do some salmon fishing. We talked about the rain on the island and what that would be like to live there. It was a very specific dream, and he never did it. And I often wondered why. Was it the isolation? Was it the travel? Was it the rain? Maybe it was that he'd have to make friends in his 70s, and maybe he thought that was difficult. Or maybe the dream was better than the reality. But for Glenn, he'll never know. And life is pretty short. We're all given one shot here on Earth, and my hope is that we all have as many of our dreams come true as we possibly can. So some of those books that I referenced earlier all left a mark on me in different ways. And I think a lot of times we get caught up in the numbers, right? We're chasing that almighty dollar. We think when our portfolio hits a certain amount, it's going to change things, or when it gets to that amount, then I'm going to retire, then I'm going to start having fun. But on that last slide, I didn't see any regrets about not having enough money or not working hard enough. Wealth should really support more than the numbers. It should support meaning. And there's a gentleman named Dr. Daniel Crosby, a great guy. I met him last summer. He's written a number of books. And in his latest book, The Soul of Wealth, he addresses 5 areas that can create a fulfilling life. And he calls it the PERMA model. So the first one is positive experiences and emotions. So these are feelings of joy, gratitude, hope, and love. Engagement, so being deeply involved in activities, especially those that challenge us and require some sort of skill. Relationships, so again, having that healthy connection with family, friends, colleagues can really significantly contribute to life satisfaction. Meaning, so having that sense of purpose or something greater than oneself to live for. And then finally, advancements or accomplishments, so the pursuit of goals and the achievement of meaningful objectives, having that, I guess, sense of pride, if you want to call it that. And I think we got to remember that money is just a tool, but these are just some of the outcomes that we can all access and have in our lives. Bill Perkins says, don't aim to die rich, aim to die fulfilled. And you know, your wealth isn't a scoreboard. You should think of it as a springboard, and you get to choose what you launch into. So my ask today is pretty simple. I just asked, what would it look like to live your wealthy life starting today? So I want to thank you for your time and energy. I'm going to turn things over to Michelle Conley, who's going to enlighten us with some tax strategies and considerations that all farm families should be aware of.